Welcome everyone to the first episode of Living Your Career Show. I'm your host. My name is Roisin Duffy. I'm a director at Blue Sky Careers. We are a recruitment and a career advisory agency. The theme of the show today is whether industry experience is really the be-all and end-all in developing and building your career, because many people think it is. Joining our show today is the lovely Liz Kearins. And Liz is a senior executive. She's a board director. She's a management consultant. Liz has recruited and built diversified teams over the years. She has also, interestingly, seamlessly moved from one sector to another. And Liz and I should say we go back a very long way. So welcome to the show, Liz. And thank you so much for joining me today on the first episode of Living Your Career. I guess for the benefit of everybody who's listening in, Liz, I've talked about you moving from one sector to another, and most people have the view that if they haven't got the experience, they're not going to apply for the job. Or if they haven't got enough experience, they're not going to apply for the job. Maybe you can tell people a little bit about how you built your career and your career story.
Sure. Well, if there's a case study in that experience doesn't count as much as you think it does, I'm it. So I started off my career as a radio journalist, morphed into a public relations specialist for a TV research company in London on the back of having media experience. From there, I moved into communications and corporate communications, particularly working across a number of sectors, including tourism and health. From there, I took it into community engagement and corporate relations, brand and reputation. And from there, broadened my career out into strategy and culture, as well as that portfolio. And in my most recent executive role, I looked after strategy, quality, risk, work, health and safety, people and culture, and corporate and community relations. And now I'm a leadership consultant working particularly with companies who are growing and building great leaders. So I'm willing to put my hand up and say I probably wasn't experienced enough for any of those jobs, but I feel that I brought things to those jobs from different sectors that I would never have been able to gain if I'd stuck at one.
I suppose one of the things that we talk about, people say to me, Roisin, I haven't got the industry experience, so they're not going to look at my CV. And I think, you've moved seamlessly from one to another. And as you said, you didn't perhaps always have the experience, but you still managed to make that transition. What knowledge and qualities do you believe you had that made those employers interested in you so that at least you got the interview? Because when you get the interview, at least then you have the opportunity of getting the job.
I think it's seeing your role as broader than what's in your role description. And I've never really taken much heed to my role description. I've made every job my own. And I've looked for ways to expand my scope. I'm a natural scope creeper. So if I see a gap and no one in my company's filling it, I tend to jump in if it's of interest to me and I think it's important. But also in pitching to employers, it's being able to talk about those transferable skills, relationship building, being an effective communicator, being able to lead and grow and nurture people. It doesn't matter what industry you're in.
You must have come to perhaps crossroads or, turning points. I think sometimes when people are in a niche, their specialization becomes that niche. And so therefore employers in that industry sector tend to pick them up and employ them. But you have gone from A to B to C to D. I mean, very, very wildly different industries. Did you find that because you adopted that strategy, that you came to more crossroads and had more turning points? And if so, how did you overcome that?
I've definitely had some turning points. Decisions about what to let go are probably the biggest. So when you're a journalist, you have a certain view of the world. You're all about working with others, interviewing others, telling other people's stories. And where I translated that into, I guess, public relations and corporate communications was, well, that's just telling stories, but telling stories from within and about a company, as opposed to telling stories to the general public from all over. And so that was a turning point for me, leaving journalism. I left at the time that the rise of infotainment came in, and I was really interested in high integrity journalism, and that certainly wasn't what was being employed at the time. So it was a values-based crossroads decision for me. Moving into corporate and community relations and moving into engagement was really a matter of thinking about what's the environment need. And there's so many transferable skills. If you're great at engagement, if you're great at working with people as a communicator, then you can take that across many things. I think another crossroads was putting my hand up to take on things like corporate strategy, a bit around corporate governance. This came from my belief that as a communicator, a professional communicator, your number one job in your organisation is to know it better than anyone else. And when you have that knowledge of how people tick and how they work together and where the organisation's trying to go and what the vision is, it's much easier then to transition into that strategy space because you're already thinking big picture. You're already thinking longer than the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. You're already thinking in terms of 3, 5 and 10-year horizons. And so those transitions were very important to me because I was expanding my skill set, and I've always seen that as an advantage and a career advantage for me. I'd also be quick to say I get bored easily. So I do tend to expand my portfolio because I become interested in other things. Culture was another one. I became fascinated by culture when I joined an organisation that had probably the most toxic culture I've ever seen. People were downright nasty to one another in that organisation. And I was on the executive team. I had an opportunity to turn that around. And so for me, I saw that was a responsibility as much as anything. But I grew to have a real passion for how creating great organisational cultures drives great strategic performance. So they all link. So I guess I look for linkages. And my crossroads are all about how will this take me forward?
I guess the question there too, Liz, when you're changing culture, culture comes back to good leadership. It comes back to a desire for positive change. And it comes back to the people that you recruit. Now, you would have built your team there and you would have seen other people recruit and build their teams. Were you conscious, I guess, of whether people had particular industry experience? What were the things, and this is important for those people right now who are impacted by COVID-19. Look at the people in tourism or travel, perhaps even recruitment, quite frankly. There are many, the airline industry, there are so many people that are impacted by what's happening right now. And I saw a piece yesterday on LinkedIn, and I think I shared it, and it basically said, we're in the travel industry. We've survived, 9/11, SARS, now COVID-19, and we're going to pull through. We are so closely aligned to our client and client service, our customer service. Why aren't you employing us? Why are you not regarding our industry experience? And I suppose for people listening to this today, we can talk about our experiences, but that's the core reality for those people right now. When you were recruiting in this company and you were trying to improve the culture and improve the mix of people and the aptitude and the attitude of those people, the propensity for change, what were you looking for?
I certainly wasn't looking for industry experience. And in fact, I've employed many, many people who haven't worked in the industry before. And even in specialist fields, I've employed people in communications roles that have never done communication before. What I look for is value set. I look for passion and enthusiasm and interest. I think they trump almost anything. I look for people who can, in an interview setting, explain some of the things they've done and have real insight into what worked and what maybe didn't work so well and what they've learned. So people who are lifelong learners, that's what I'm interested in. And I'm looking for people who really want to be part of the organisation. And I've had people say, I've got no experience in this sector, Liz, but I'm really interested in it. It really appeals to me. That's worth everything to me. I believe that passion trumps experience every day of the week.
I suppose it's interesting because people sometimes in their application letters don't really know how to capture that. And I'm sure that over the years, you've seen a raft of applications that some good, bad, and indifferent. And, you talk it's very hard to caption passion in an application letter. But is there certain things that stick out to you and say, she may not have experience? Because this is what happens. People write about themselves, but because they don't know your industry, they don't know how to link themselves to your industry. They don't know how to link themselves in terms of their transferable skills other than to talk about themselves. So when you look at that application letter, when you look at that CV, is there one thing in particular that tells you they've done their homework and they are deeply interested because you haven't met them at this stage?
Look, there's definitely things I look for. So I look for people being personal. I hate letters that look like they could have gone to 15 different companies and just have had a word replaced here and there. I look for people who are very real about themselves. And I think the best application letters are very personal. They've ditched the corporate speak. They're actually talking about who you are as an individual and why you want to work for us. Why do you want to work here? Be specific. Do your research. Absolutely. Find out about the company. Find out about the values of the company. Find out about the strategy of the company. Link what you can offer to the strategy and the values of the company. That's what I'm looking for. Your technical skills, that's a given. You're going to need some technical skills, but your interpersonal communication, leadership, diversity and inclusion skills, those are things that transfer across any industry, and every employer should be looking for those right now.
You know, Liz, when you started out and as your career has evolved, we talk about how people, I suppose, develop their learning. How do you prioritize your learning? You've gone across different industries and not having industry experience from A to B didn't matter. But something in there in your learning and development did count. And I suppose if you could just explain how you have prioritized, like some people at the moment are saying, I'm going to do vocational courses so that I can retrain in essential services. Other people are thinking about doing MBAs or masters or even degrees if they haven't done degrees or whatever courses. But, you're somebody who's evolving in your career all the time, even now. How did you prioritize your learning and your development so that that stood out on your application?
First up, I don't think I always did it that well, and I think I've got better at it as I've got older. I now realize that I need to invest in myself. And so that means that even if I can't do something with my company, I can actually look into it and do it myself if that's of interest to me. So this year, for example, I've done a program through Cornell University in the States on strategic HR leadership because I was interested in that. I've done an accreditation program, and I've done lots of online learning. And if there's been a year for online learning, this is it. I mean, everything's out there, and a lot of it's free or very low cost at the moment. So I think you do need to prioritize it, though. I mean, even when I was at my busiest in roles that stretched me from morning till night, it was always important to me to stay contemporary, to stay across contemporary issues. I tried to go to really good, if I got a chance to go to a good conference, I'd be very selective. So World Business Forum is one I've been to several times. I would highly recommend it. They bring in the best people from across the world, really great foresight and thinking that goes on there. I read extensively. I've got a massive library of books. I'm always buying new books or going to the library and borrowing books. I subscribe to 1 billion newsletters, and some weeks that drives me nuts. But, if I get one gem out of a newsletter once a month, I am over the moon. And I think, the other thing I spend time doing is actually meeting with other people in other industries and other roles and finding out what they're doing, what's happening in their industries. So staying alive across sectors, particularly if you're looking to move sectors right now, start getting to know some people in the sector you want to work in. Start finding out what the big issues are with them. Start finding out what they're talking about. What's the language in that organisation? Because that's going to help you write the right application and get your foot in the door.
I think that's so important. Whenever I talk to people, I say to people, it's about your knowledge, it's about your context and their connections. And I say, within your organisation, you can be an absolute legend. But if you spend so much time on cultivating that brand, what have you done outside of that organization if change is visited upon you? When you talk about cultivating these relationships and developing this language and this broader rapport, what sort of sources and means do you use? Because I know a lot of people are on LinkedIn, and I sometimes, LinkedIn is great, let's be frank, there's some brilliant stuff on LinkedIn, but it can get a bit flooded too. And, it can get a bit noisy. So I'm very interested to know, what have been perhaps, conferences are a good way of obviously connecting with people and developing your subject matter. I guess, what else do you use? What other sources?
I talk to people I know about people they know. So networks within networks are always important. I think one of my pieces of advice would be never be afraid to approach someone who you think might be able to help you. Most of the time, you will get help. Most of us are very flattered to be asked, and we're more than willing to help give someone else a leg up. So, you might be a mentor to somebody. Certainly if you're in your career and you're looking to transition, perhaps look for a mentor in that industry or even a sponsor who can help you get a foot in the door. So use your networks within networks, but don't be afraid to cold call either. And I don't mean cold call to sell yourself. I mean to say, reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, look, I'm really interested in your sector and industry. I've heard that you're great at what you do. Would you have even 10 minutes for a phone call to give me some advice? Most people are very happy to help. It's most of us are scared to put our hands up. That's the problem. We're frightened.
Honestly,
to make that first step.
It will come to you. It's quite interesting. I think when people are asking for help too, I think your thoughts on mutuality. I mean, I'm in the recruitment industry and I get so many people, and we obviously run a career advisory side of the business as well. And the number of people that will send me applications and say, Roisin, I'd love you to review this application. Roisin, can you give me your thoughts? Roisin, what do you think? What improvements can I make? In reality, my time is extremely limited. And I have to employ my time to put people into work and to help them to develop their careers. And I'm just interested, I guess, in terms of how, when you're building those relationships as a potential mentor or somebody asking you to be a mentor, how do you decide whether you want to mentor them or not? And if you feel there's a spirit of mutuality there?
I do think it comes down to connection. But it also comes down to me to, can I really help? Am I the best person? And I've certainly referred people who've approached me onto people I think would be a better fit. And so that's another thing. As someone on the other side, if someone asks you for help and you can't, feel free to refer them to somebody else and help them make a connection. That's the least you can do in terms of being kind and passing it on and paying it forward. I think the other thing about that mutuality is, please don't take people who do things for a living, like you, Roisin. This is your business. Don't take that for granted. You may consider that, it's a quick job to review your resume, but to do that well as a professional careers advisor is not a quick task. So there may be times when you need to pay for advice and support, and you should feel free to do that and feel actually that you're giving back to the person that you're working with. You'll get a lot more. I guarantee the person will give more than you pay anyway. My experience with seeking professional help is that people are very willing to help, but sometimes you do need to be willing to pay for it. It depends what it is. If you want a quick
and I think also,
it's very different to a full review.
I think that's absolutely right. Out of interest, how has career advice played a role in your career?
Oh, Roisin, how can I count the ways? So as you referenced earlier, Roisin and I have worked together. So when Roisin first met, I think I had 2 preschoolers and 1 at school, and I've now got 3 over 20. So it gives you an idea of the longevity of our relationship. And we met in a professional context. Roisin helped me transition from a role that I had actually resigned from based on a values conflict, into a temporary role, and then into another temporary role, and then into a permanent role. And I've been placed by Roisin multiple times since. And I guess what career advice has done for me is it's helped me actually plot a trajectory that's seen me be able to grow my capability, build my leadership, and expand my scope to the point where I'm now able to be very selective about what I'm interested in working on. I have some great choices. I work with great people. I love what I do every single day, and I feel very blessed. So for me, the role that you've played as a mentor, a coach, a cheerleader at times, but also, talking me through some tough calls. I remember at one point in my career, I was offered 2 roles. One was a national role, working at a senior level, in a large organisation that had big influence. The other was a smaller organization, a startup effectively, and an executive role. And I remember really being torn. I was very attracted to both roles. And Roisin, it was you who really talked me through, well, what do you really want and where are you going? So the value of someone like you who knows the sectors, knows the industry, knows people in the organizations as well, and can give really good coaching and advice, I think it's invaluable. And I certainly wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't met you. So it was very serendipitous.
You're going to make me all shy here now, Liz. I just want to share that with you. I guess the other thing in all of that too, at the moment, people are sort of thinking to themselves, I need to get a job. I have bills to pay. I have family responsibilities. I mean, that's the hardcore situation for many right now as a result of COVID-19. And I guess then for others, perhaps, as you said yourself, you can be more selective now. You are, more informed, more evolved, highly valued, valued, and you have strong values in the way that you operate. How important is it because I sometimes get very frustrated with people who just jump from job to job to job to job. And I sort of sometimes say, take stock, actually have a think about what you're doing here, because sometimes by just stepping back, you'll get more longevity out of this opportunity than you will if you're just hop skipping all over the place. Very hard to work with people who will take the next job rather than thinking about the longer consequences of what they do. From your perspective, you've had long periods of very sustainable and enjoyable employment, productive employment with people. Why was that important in the choice of role and the choice of career?
When I was younger, I jumped around.
The company, I think, is very important.
Yeah, when I was younger, I definitely jumped around a bit more. And I was constantly looking for promotion, I guess, which for many young people is, you're trying to climb that ladder. And I don't know if I necessarily knew why I was doing that at the time. I was just doing it because that's what you did. As I've got older, I guess it's been very important to me to work in organisations that value people. And I am committed to working for organisations that give something back to the community. So in every job I don't look at sectors that I don't feel are right for me. So I am selective in that way. Why I think that's important and why putting some time in is important, I've certainly taken steps back. So in my last role, I started at a level 4 in the organisation and ended up in the executive team. And I'd taken a step from an executive role back to a level 4 role because strategically I could see that would be a good move for me in the long term. And I trusted in the fact that I have strengths and that would be recognised and that opportunities might arise. And so in the 6 and a nearly half years that I was there, I had 3 different roles at 3 different levels, ultimately working in the executive team. So I think you shouldn't be afraid to take lateral or even slightly backward steps if it's going to take you forward. But to your point, be purposeful. Think about what you really want, what stage in your life and career you're at. Think about what really matters to you and then make your choice. And if it's a toss-up between a job and a company whose values don't align, but's at a higher level or pays more, and a job and a company where you feel really passionate and your values are in alignment, but it pays less or the prestige is less, go the one with less prestige every time. Go the values fit. You won't regret it in the long term.
So spot on. So we'll be wrapping up in about 5, Liz. And I just want to come back to, again, we talked about, before the show, we were talking about how some people think people are afraid of change. Or I suppose, I guess the question are people so hardwired that they can't change? And if you say to somebody, you really do need to diversify, you really do need to regroup, it's time to step back. Do you think that people are capable of making that adjustment? Right now, people are in a situation where they need work. People are in a situation where they're stuck in a job because of COVID-19. And we in Australia are very prone to movement. I guess, what are your thoughts? And if you have that, if people are hardwired and say, I've got to stay here, I'm afraid of change. Or I'm afraid of putting my application in because I don't have that industry experience. If you have one message that you would like to impart to people right now, that are, whatever their situation, in terms of how to get through this COVID situation. Because yes, we may have a vaccination next year and we may go back to some semblance of normality, but it will never go back to be the way it was. We've changed now. What would be your one message to people?
Well, number one, I think that people are hardwired to change. And that's why human beings are the most successful mammals on the planet, because we're good at it and we do it a lot. And so I think the biggest confidence trap here is confidence itself. So people who have perhaps been made redundant, often for the first time ever, it's a blow to be made redundant. Even if you know it's due to COVID-19, it's still, I was chosen to leave. That's how people feel. You need to work through the emotions that come with that and start thinking about what's really important to you. What are you passionate about? What do you love? What about your last job did you love? And where else could you find that? What other industry might you find that in? If you've worked in the travel industry, if you've worked in the airlines, I'm willing to bet you've got customer experience and customer service skills that would be the envy of many. You'd also potentially, if you were working as a pilot, have skills that are equally very transferable into other leadership roles, into crisis management, into a whole bunch of things. So I think you need to think laterally about what your skill sets, talents, abilities, and passions really are. And don't let "we need at least 10 years experience in the X sector" hold you back. It's rubbish. It's the experience trap. We don't need that. What we need is people who have great skills, talents, and abilities, and they can lend them in different environments. And the skills and abilities you bring will come with experience in an industry that could be super helpful to the new industry that you move into, ways of thinking they haven't considered before. So really sell yourself as having something special, a unique selling proposition that others won't have. Don't hold yourself back. The biggest limitation is your belief that you can't. So reframe that belief to you can, because that whole mindset, that drives how you're going to show up in your application and at interview.
Liz, that's probably been the quickest half hour that I've ever spent with you, just while we're on that subject. I can't honestly say how just honored I am to have you on the show today with me and for you to be my first guest on the Living Your Career show. I just hope that people take away some pearls of wisdom from what you've shared today and not draw their conclusions that if I don't have industry experience, I'm not going to make that application, because they have so much more to offer. It's how you tell your story. On that note, the Living Your Career show will broadcast every Tuesday and Thursday, noon, Brisbane time. I'm back again on Thursday. We're here for you, the worker, the employee. We're here to give you motivation and inspiration, to give you tools, to give you techniques. We're here for you. So tune in for more information then. And Liz, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Roisin. It was my absolute honor and pleasure.
Thank you.